Back to the Future was released when I was still a child, and for a very long time, it was the purest definition of magic. I still remember how thrilled I was when I saw the DeLorean soar into the air, leaving trails of fire on the asphalt, carrying with it a promise of a bright future. Back then, I believed Marty McFly was the luckiest hero in the world, the one who managed to fix the past and save his family. But what neither I nor millions of other viewers realized was that this film was actually built upon the ashes of a forbidden ending. To keep the story alive in the safe glow of a family movie, the filmmakers were forced to conceal its warped underbelly. From the idea that Marty is, in truth, a timeline murderer who completely erases the existence of his own siblings, to the brutal violence of Biff Tannen and the disturbing, incestuous undertones between mother and son that went far beyond acceptable limits in the earliest drafts. The 13 Dark Secrets below will reveal what Back to the Future has carefully avoided for decades. 13. Marty McFly, the invisible killer of the timeline. We usually smile at the sight of Marty returning to 1985 and finding his family wealthy and happy. But pause for a moment and look closely into his eyes. That is not the gaze of a son coming home. It is the gaze of someone who has just committed the most flawless act of personality genocide in cinematic history. In the original script, and in deeper analyses of time paradoxes, Marty is effectively a murderer. By interfering with his parents' first meeting in 1955, he completely shatters the trajectory of their lives. And the consequence? The siblings Marty grew up with, Dave and Linda, the awkward, unsuccessful versions, are utterly erased from reality. The people he meets at the end of the film may wear the same faces, but they possess different memories, different habits, and life experiences in which Marty had no part. The chilling truth is that Marty killed his real family in exchange for an upgraded version. He stands in the living room, staring at strangers who resemble his loved ones, and chooses to live a counterfeit life atop the ashes of old souls. In the original timeline, Dave and Linda may still exist somewhere in a temporal fracture, screaming as their existence is stolen by their own younger brother. Marty didn't save his family. He simply replaced them with perfect copies to satisfy his desire for a wealthier life. A killer who doesn't wield a knife, but uses time itself to execute his own blood. 12. Biff Tannen and the Scenes banned for being too brutal. In our memory, Biff Tannen is just a big, dumb bully, occasionally played for laughs. But in the earliest drafts and deleted footage, the truth about this character was far darker than what Universal Pictures allowed on screen. There is a reason the film nearly failed to receive a PG rating. In the original script, Biff's actions toward Lorraine in the car on prom night go far beyond harassment. They are described in brutally explicit terms, a full sexual assault depicted with a level of violence that reportedly shocked the crew themselves. Deleted scenes portray a Biff who is feral and unhinged. And Lorraine's suffering is not merely fear, but deep psychological trauma. Censors at the time issued a stark warning. If that level of brutality remained, the film would be slapped with an adult rating and barred from family theatres. Softening Biff into a later comedic figure was merely an attempt to mask the true nature of a predator. The reality is that, within the Back to the Future universe, Lorraine faced a horrifying spectre of violence, and even when time changes, those invisible scars never truly disappear. The decision to cut this brutality was not made to protect Lorraine, but to protect the film's box office potential, burying a grotesque truth in the darkness of lost footage. 11. The betrayal of reality, the buried secret ending. This is the darkest chapter in Back to the Future's history. A finale that Universal executives allegedly ordered destroyed because it was too psychologically devastating for audiences. In the version we know, Marty returns home and enjoys triumph, but in the suppressed script titled The Betrayal of Reality, the moment Marty steps into the luxurious 1985 house is not paradise. It is an alien hell. When he calls out, "Mum! Dad!" the people who turn to look at him have completely different faces. The timeline has been fractured so severely that the George and Lorraine he knew never existed at all. Marty realizes in horror that he is a foreign body in a reality with no place for him. He flees to his bedroom, where another disturbing truth is revealed. Marty finds notes left by Doc Brown, showing that the eccentric scientist calculated everything from the beginning. Doc did not accidentally send Marty into the past. He raised him as an experiment, manipulating events to create a perfected Marty, a permanently loyal assistant with no remaining ties to family. But the final shock is the most haunting of all. When Marty looks into the mirror in search of salvation, he sees his face slowly disintegrating into particles of nothingness. By changing the past, he has created a paradox in which he was never born. The happy reality we see in the film is merely a brilliant hallucination inside Marty's decaying mind, a final dream before he is completely erased from the timeline. The studio cut it because they didn't want audiences to realize that their hero actually died in absolute isolation. The incestuous obsession, when maternal love becomes a nightmare. The most controversial element, and the one that troubled screenwriter Bob Gale the most, was the relationship between Marty and the younger version of his mother. We usually treat Lorraine's pursuit of Marty as an ironic, comedic situation, but in confidential early drafts, that boundary was erased in a deeply disturbing way. Bob Gale has admitted that the studio was extremely anxious, bordering on panic, over the kissing scene in the car. In one early version of the script, Lorraine's feelings for Marty were not merely a fleeting crush. They carried the weight of a warped, erotic obsession, pushing Marty into a morally horrifying situation no child should ever have to endure. Deleted lines reveal that Lorraine's thoughts extended far beyond an awkward embrace, creating a suffocating and perverse atmosphere. The truth is that the film came dangerously close to one of humanity's greatest taboos: incest. The filmmakers fought hard to reframe the kiss as a moment of realization by having Lorraine say it felt like kissing her brother. In reality, this was little more than a clumsy damage control maneuver. The idea of a mother desiring her own son is a psychological stain the film desperately tries to bleach away with humor. Behind the laughter lies a dark truth about distorted desire, a trauma Marty would have to carry for the rest of his life every time he looks at his mother in the present. 9. The toxic relationship between Doc and Marty. Friendship or manipulation? Have you ever asked, in the bluntest and most realistic terms, why a 17-year-old boy would spend all his free time with an eccentric old man considered insane by the entire town? In the original script, the relationship between Doc and Marty was never portrayed as the innocent friendship the finished film attempts to sell. It was described as toxic and deeply manipulative. Doc Brown was written as a social outcast, a man driven by unhinged ambition and a profound lack of basic empathy. He drags Marty into life-threatening experiments, from exposure to radioactive materials to gunfights with terrorists, without any parental consent. Why 2 a.m. in a deserted parking lot? Why is Marty the only one chosen to witness and document everything? Later, film critics have pointed out an uncomfortable truth. Doc didn't need a friend, he needed a pawn. He exploited Marty's emotional neglect under his weak-willed father, George, positioning himself as a counterfeit father figure. Marty's presence in Doc's life functioned as an insurance policy against Doc's own mistakes. In the real world, an elderly man secretly spending late nights alone with a minor would be considered deeply disturbing behaviour, and the original script nearly exposed the perversion inherent in that psychological control, before it was romanticised by Alan Silvestri's music. 8. The deadly refrigerator, the idea that nearly became a disaster. Before the sleek DeLorean became a pop culture icon, The time machine in Steven Spielberg and Robert Zemeckis' earliest drafts was, in fact, a refrigerator. It sounds ridiculous, but the reason it was abandoned reveals a far darker concern about social responsibility and the fear of child deaths. In that version, Marty would have to climb into a reinforced refrigerator to protect himself from the pressures of time travel. After further consideration, however, the producers panicked at the thought of children imitating their hero, climbing into old refrigerators at home and locking themselves inside. In the 1980s, many refrigerators could not be opened from the inside, and death by suffocation was a very real danger. The refrigerator concept wasn't dropped for aesthetic reasons alone, but because the filmmakers realised they were on the verge of creating a mass killing machine for children. The entire storyline had to be reworked, turning the time machine into a mobile vehicle to avert a potential media catastrophe. 7. The tragedy of Eric Stoltz, the destroyed dark cut. In our collective memory, Marty McFly is an energetic teenager defined by Michael J. Fox's smile. In reality, the film was nearly completed with a different lead actor, Eric Stoltz. And this is where the secret truly begins. Eric wasn't fired for being bad, he was fired for being too real. He portrayed Marty as deeply depressed, withdrawn, and genuinely terrified by the paradoxes of time travel. Crew members later recalled that when Eric performed, the set felt oppressively heavy, like a psychological crime drama about a man who had lost his soul. He rejected comedic beats entirely, turning Marty's encounters with his parents into an existential nightmare of alienation and despair. Robert Zemeckis was forced to make a brutal decision: fire Eric and destroy nearly all of the footage. Why? Because they feared audiences would recognise the truth, that time travel is not a joyride but a process that psychologically shatters the human mind. Eric Stoltz's cut remains a dark legend in Universal's archives, proof that the film nearly became a devastating tragedy instead of a crowd-pleasing adventure. 6. Doc Brown and the near-suicide moment in the parking lot. Rewatch the iconic scene at the Twin Pines Mall parking lot. When the DeLorean charges straight toward Doc and Marty at 88 miles per hour, Marty panics and runs, but look closely at Doc Brown. He doesn't move, not a flinch, not a single instinct of self-preservation. Film analysts and longtime fans have proposed a chilling theory. Doc Brown was ready to die in that moment. In 1985, Doc was a failed scientist, mocked, dismissed, and financially ruined after decades of burning through his family fortune on mad experiments. If the machine didn't work, if Einstein the dog didn't vanish into nothingness, the car would have torn his body apart. That stillness wasn't confidence, it was surrender. Doc had wagered his life on an all-or-nothing bet. Either he was a genius or he would die violently and end his loneliness once and for all. The film's most triumphant moment actually begins with a desperate suicidal impulse, a detail so dark that the blazing fire trails on the asphalt neatly distract us from it. 5. The blood power source, when science shakes hands with crime. We often laugh at the scene where Doc Brown tricks Libyan terrorists with an old machine casing stuffed with dead batteries. But strip away the humour, and this becomes one of the most ethically disturbing elements ever placed in a family film. To fulfill his personal ambition, an American scientist knowingly collaborated with and deceived armed criminal organisations. The energy that sends Marty home is paid for with the lives of others placed at risk. Doc doesn't just steal plutonium, a weapon of mass destruction. He brings gun violence directly into a peaceful town. Portraying this lightly is essentially laundering an act of international crime. In truth, Doc Brown stains his hands with blood and death to build his machine. The Libyan gunmen are not comic relief. They are a reminder that the DeLorean does not run on pure science. It runs on deception and blood debts. Debts that, Without the mercy of the timeline, Marty and his family would have paid with their lives long ago. 4. Psychological manipulation, when Marty reprograms personalities. We like to celebrate Marty as a devoted son who saved his parents' lives. But from a psychological standpoint, Marty's actions amount to a horrifying act of personality theft. He doesn't merely rescue George from Biff, he completely reprograms his parents' identities to fit his vision of an upper-class life. Marty forces George to become a strong man by his own standards and pushes Lorraine to abandon her rebellious nature to become a domesticated mother in a wealthy household. When Marty returns to 1985, he looks at his parents like a creator surveying newly engineered beings. He doesn't love them for who they are. He loves the successful versions he sculpted. In Marty's world, his parents are puppets with rewritten memories and personalities, engineered for his comfort. It is ruthless manipulation hiding behind the language of family love. 3. The time curse, silent genocide. There is a brutal truth that physicists often mention when watching Back to the Future. Whenever a new timeline is created, the old one is destroyed. That means the instant Marty changes the past, billions of lives, billions of love stories and children are erased from existence. Marty returns to enjoy a brand new four-wheel drive truck, but the cost is the annihilation of an entire universe. Every friend, memory and relationship from the original 1985 is wiped out by his own actions. Marty becomes a silent genocider, sacrificing countless souls for a reality that simply feels more comfortable to him. The curse of time is this: Marty can never truly go home again, because he destroyed his real home the moment he stepped into 1955. 2. The silent death, a radiation death sentence. Beyond time, paradoxes lies a biological reality the film completely ignores. Marty McFly should have died from radiation exposure just weeks after the movie ends. Doc Brown handles plutonium directly, even with gloves, and Marty stands beside a machine releasing energy bursts comparable to a miniature nuclear reactor. Throughout the journey, Marty wears no specialized protective equipment. He breathes ionized air and touches components leaking nuclear energy. According to medical studies on radiation poisoning, with that level of exposure, Marty McFly would effectively be a terminal cancer patient the moment he steps out of the car at the film's end. His happy future is nothing more than a brief pause before his body collapses from the inside. A slow, silent death is the true price Marty pays for 1.21 gigawatts of time travel. 1. The silent agony, Lorraine's psychological torture. The final and most haunting truth lies in Lorraine McFly's silence. Imagine being a mother who must look every day into the face of her son, who looks exactly like the mysterious young man she once loved. The man who changed her life in the fall of 1955. How could Lorraine ever forget Calvin Klein? How could she keep that secret for 30 years without losing her mind? Her silence isn't forgetfulness, it's extreme psychological obsession. Every hug, every glance toward Marty carries the shadow of forbidden love and unbearable confusion about reality itself. Lorraine lives inside a 3-decade performance, pretending ignorance while her heart is constantly torn apart by memories of a man who appeared from nowhere and vanished after prom night. It is a prolonged mental torture that no happy ending could ever truly erase. Hollywood chose to keep us in the light, with Michael J. Fox's smile and the blazing fire trails through Hill Valley's streets. They hid the blood-soaked drafts, Lorraine's silent suffering, and the manipulations of a lonely scientist. And perhaps that was the only way a legend could survive. Because sometimes the truth is simply too heavy to carry inside our most cherished memories. If you had the chance to climb into that DeLorean, would you be willing to trade your current reality for a better version, even if the cost was the existence of the people you love? Or would you stay and accept the clumsiness of this imperfect life? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if this video completely changed how you see your favorite film, don't forget to like and subscribe so we can continue uncovering the dark corners of cinema they've tried to hide for decades.